Hey, Nick from Playbook here. Welcome to day 25 of our starting a software company in 100 days project. And so today I wanted to highlight an example of some of the iterative design work that we're doing as we are working through building out the Playbook MVP. So we've been at it for about 2 weeks building out the MVP of the project. A lot of time just spent building the database, building our GraphQL queries, building our initial user interface. And if you haven't seen any of the videos here before, what Playbook is a tool for managing SOPs, standard processes, checklists, workflows. And one of the pieces of a task is a due date. And so starting out, the UI for this had a fixed due date. But if you think about the rigidity of that, the lack of the real world flexibility of that, realized that I wanted to add more flexibility into how you structure a date. And so if you have a list of, a bunch of different tasks, and each one of those tasks is completed at different times, how could you pick, on task number 7, how could you have a due date of, March 3rd? What if your tasks are taking longer? What if they don't get completed until March 7th? You could really have things fall apart. And so more of a dynamic due date process, I think, is very important. And so rather than talking about specifically, every product's different, and I just want to share with you. So if you're building a software product, you can learn from how we're doing things. And so I'm using a design service called Many Pixels, which offers unlimited design for a flat price. They did the initial design for Playbook, and then we had a longer list of maybe 20, 25 things that we wanted to iterate on. And rather than just doing the back and forth with Many Pixels, we engaged a designer on Upwork who made those changes for us. And now when we're coming back, there's probably 3 or 4 pieces of UI that are a little bit more complex, more workflow-like. This is probably the easiest of them. But we kicked back to Many Pixels because the designer we've been working with there, I'm quite happy with. And so here's how the Many Pixels design works. You provide a brief, you provide files. And so I talked about what Playbook is, and Binsar is the designer's name. He actually worked on the initial design, so he's familiar, but I just wanted to lay it out in case they had anybody else working on the project. And so, I'll just kind of read this here. One attribute of a task is a due date. Instead of only offering a fixed due date, I'd like to offer the following types of due dates. A fixed due date, we still want to offer that. X number of days after a process was initiated. A process would be, a list of tasks, a checklist, a workflow, and then X number of days after a certain task was completed. And so we want to be able to have that conditional logic within the due date creation process. And so we basically took a day and we got back I'm really zoomed in here. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I wanted to zoom in and look at this piece of UI. And so I don't know if you can, I'm taking up about half the screen. I'm hoping it's not for you. So when a user creates a task, they can pick from a variety of these components. So they will have a button, they will click the input, or they'll click the button and it'll bring up a list of components and they can select them. Here's what the creation state of those looks like. They won't necessarily all be shown. They'll be hidden behind a button. And then the due date, we just designed, and this is something that we could design on our own. This isn't a complex piece of UI, but given that we're using Many Pixels, I thought it made sense to utilize them for this service. So the user creates the fixed due date, a certain number of days after the process is initiated, and then a certain number of days after a task is completed. This word process needs to be task. So it's one of the tasks that could be in this streaming checklist of tasks that you build here in the process builder of Playbook. And just one example where we're going through the scope of this project, and I'm starting to model out some internal processes that we have at Harvest Profit, which is really the real reason we're building this tool, is to help ourselves and hopefully others spend more time focusing on things that can drive revenue and profitability, and standardizing processes so we can work more on our business versus in our business. So this is just an example of a complex, of an iterative piece of design development that we've identified as we were building out the MVP of Harvest Profit. And so at the end of the day, we're pretty, just keep moving forward. This is a dynamic process. Probably here in 5 to 10 days, we're going to try to define the set of outstanding tasks we have for the Playbook MVP. But I just wanted to show you one piece of UI and one piece of functionality that we are modifying in our initial designs, and that is adding more dynamic due dates to Playbook. So if you are working on a project yourself and you come across things that need to change, don't be afraid to change them. Have a process that accepts changes. Have a design and development process that is open to iterative design, because at the end of the day, it's really hard to have a complete, certain, concrete scope up front. So with that, that's day 25. Would love to have you subscribe, like the video. If you're getting value out of following us along, here we are, 25% done with the Playbook project, and pretty excited where we're going. Starting to get a little nervous about being able to hit our deadline, but at the end of the day, we're just going to keep pushing along and see what happens. Thank you.